Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back. Brandon again. Today I want to talk about what I think is one of the best flat benches on the market, which is the Rep Fitness FB-5000. Not only is it a great performing bench, it has a very low entry-level cost of $149. And if that's not enough for you, it makes one hell of a seat for filming these YouTube videos. So I'm going to go ahead and link the product description page in the description box below. If you want all the specifications and all the other information about it. I'm going to talk a little bit about specs. I don't want to harp on those just because specs don't always tell the whole story in terms of performance, but I will say that this does meet competition specifications. What that means for you is the pad itself is 17 inches off the ground, it's 12 inches wide, 48 inches long. It can handle up to 1,000 pounds, which is more than I would ever need, and the unit weighs over 60 pounds, which is pretty impressive because my own unit doesn't even weigh that much. Now that being said, it is a competition style bench and spec bench, and some of the design actually carried over into that as well. So if you take a look at the front, it has a single post design, which is great, especially when you're setting up your feet. Traditionally speaking, with a lot of the competition from, let's say, Rogue or Titan or other manufacturers, they would often have a flat foot design in the front. I always tend to hit my feet on those. In fact, I mentioned that in my Strength Shop flat bench review. I don't like that. I don't like having to set up around the bench. Number one, because it's annoying, and number two is because when you go to competition, that's not going to be the case where that is there. They all have single post designs. And that's another huge win for me. The fact that you can train on something that's very similar to what you'll see in competition makes a big difference, because in my previous commercial gym days, I trained on benches that were higher or lower, thinner or wider, slippier, whatever the case may be, and then going to compete and the bench is different. I'm used to training a certain way on a certain style bench with certain dimensions, and if the dimensions are vastly different, or even an inch, because an inch does make a big difference despite what people may have told you, it can definitely throw you off. So I like to be able to practice how I play, so to say. So this makes a big difference for me, and I really like to see that they carried over this single post design in the front. I also mentioned before that this thing weighs over 60 pounds. That being said though, there's a handle and two wheels on the back, so you can easily pull it in or pull it out of the rack of your choice. It's moved around very easily, which is nice. Speaking of the frame itself, it's heavy duty, as I mentioned, 60 plus pounds. That's because it's 3x3 11 gauge steel, the same kind that's actually in my Rogue rack behind me. Again, that's really nice to see, as oftentimes you'll see companies go with a lesser gauge steel or 2.5 by 2.5 design. So 3x3 11 gauge steel, that's a win for me again, especially considering the price point. Another big thing for me is the way that the frame mounts to the pad itself. There's 4 mounting points, and they're actually jutted out, so you get some real good stability with the pad. And for example, if you take a look at the Titan Fitness flat bench, there's only 2 mounting points, and they're right in the center of the bench, similar to what the Strength Shop bench was. And I found that that leads the pad and the bench itself to be pretty unstable and a little bit wobbly, if you will, and definitely not a fan of that. So I'm glad to see that that's not the case here with this Rep Fitness bench. Speaking of the pad, there's a couple different ways to mount it depending on where you want it. The pad itself is 4 inches thick, so this is considered a fat pad or a fat bench, if you will, which hence the name FB-5000. So it's a little bit thicker. The padding itself is pretty firm, not on the same firmness as you would get with, let's say, Rogue, for example. But again, given the price of this bench, which is $149, I don't think you'll have any complaints about it. The vinyl on it is also very sticky, hence the competition specs and competition type grip. That's nice to see. I believe when Rep first released this, they had some complaints that the vinyl wasn't as grippy as it should be, so they re-released it and upped it, and I gotta say it's really nice. Now I do wear A7 shirts a lot with the bar grip on the back, but if you've been watching my training videos at all, you'll see oftentimes I don't bench with one of these shirts just because I don't need to. The grip on this bench is very good. So overall, this bench is phenomenal as is. So for $149, you get a lot. One of the great benefits about Rep Fitness and this particular bench is they also offer an alternative if you want a wider pad, which I do have, and that's actually the one that's mounted on here right now. So same general specs, except it's 14 inches wide. It's very similar to what you might find with a Rogue Thompson fat pad. So a little bit more room for your shoulders. However, you could also use the standard pad as well, depending on what you want. And the nice thing about this particular wider pad is that it's only a $50 upgrade, and you can buy it whenever you want. As opposed to, let's say, the Rogue Thompson fat pad, which retails for $155. I think this one is a no-brainer, especially if you want to get into it, and not really sure if it's worth the investment. It's a good idea to go with the Rep Fitness one, just because, again, the price point is so much lower. Another big benefit of going with the Rep Fitness design is they specifically designed this frame to accommodate a fat pad. Traditionally with Rogue, who didn't initially have anything designed for the fat pad, you'd have then a bench that was like 18 inches or taller. They have since released a shorty version of that rack, but you don't have much options. You can only really go with one of their fat pads as well, and the price starts to get almost double to what you're paying for this Rep Fitness version. So it's really nice to see Rep kind of take some things into consideration in their design and put out a bench that's not only spec'd and performed very well, but for a very low entry cost. Now that's not to say that's perfect, because there are some things I would probably change about it. Number one, even though I really like the single post design, if you're sitting on the end like I am, you do get a little bit of instability. Rep actually addresses this on their website though and says this is normal, and I can vouch that if you're laying on the bench and using it to bench press, you don't notice that because you're getting equal points of pressure across the whole bench itself. But I do just want to call that out, as when you're setting up and maybe have your feet up, as long as the IPF still allows that, you might notice a little bit of instability there. The padding, as I mentioned, it's not overly firm, it's not overly soft, but I think it could be a little bit firmer. I'd like to see that. And the vinyl seems just a little bit looser than I would like. I think they could have done a better job fitting the vinyl to the pad. But other than that, I don't really have any complaints, and it's one of the reasons why I think this is the best bench you can buy for the money, and I'd highly recommend it if you're in the market. So hopefully that helps. If you have other questions about this, let me know in the comment section below. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and stay big.